Welcome. Thank you all for joining us this week. And I am really excited, Akari, to have you with us. You have such a unique, beautiful story. And this is the what we're going to talk about today. When you and I pre-talked, we a word that we threw around or a phrase was the missing piece. And I hate using that as like the missing piece because everyone's like, oh, tell me what the missing piece is. And there's a lot of people and things that are missing pieces. But I will say this is a really big piece that a lot of people don't know about, haven't heard about, don't know how to access, don't even know it exists. And for those of my clients who have done this, myself included, I have seen such beautiful healing that I don't know that can happen in other ways. And so let's just jump in. And if you'll just give us a little bit about, from your words, who you are, what you do, how you got to where you are today.
Thank you. Yes. So my name is Akari. I coined the phrase emotional biohacker because it takes a lot of biohacking to get to the root cause of things. And so I worked a corporate job for a long time in the banking industry, and it was mainly with men, right? And so very male dominated arena where I was the only woman at the table many times. And so it was a very familiar space, but it was very, very stressful. And so I was very fortunate that my office, I'm in the LA area. So in my office in downtown LA ended up closing for Thanksgiving. And I was like, should I be giving thanks? But that's when everything started to kind of fizzle for me because we don't pay attention to ourselves. We're so distracted with outside things. And all of a sudden, my body started to fall apart. And it wasn't that it was falling apart, it was that it had been completely a mess, but I was just too distracted to pay attention to it, which I realize now looking backwards how powerful our brain is
Mm.
and how we don't even give it the proper attention because, oh my gosh, my brain completely like didn't even give me a chance to experience what I was feeling. My amygdala went shut down. So a lot of that stress, and that's when I started to get curious about how I could tap into ways of what I didn't even know back then was my nervous system and how it was affecting me. So that's how I started to do this work. And then, of course, I ended up having a betrayal that pushed me over the edge. And like many of us, a therapist who thinks, they can do the work with you. And I'm very sarcastic. I was always thinking and saying, did you not go to class the day they were talking about betrayal trauma? Like, where are your notes? Bring them out because boy, was it like a whole other level of re-traumatization.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That institutionalized trauma when you go thinking you're going to get help and the person is not trained or qualified. And yeah, that harm that can be done through that.
completely clueless. It was so offensive. I felt so betrayed again from having someone tell me, well, it could have been worse. I've seen people and I was like, oh, okay, moving on. You're definitely not qualified. And so it took me a while to really get the kind of help that I needed. But that's what really catapulted me into the work that I do was mainly to care for my nervous system in a way that felt good. And I started with breath work, believe it or not. And I remember the first session that I had was the first time I was able to get outside of my body and get some relief.
Can
And
you explain just super briefly what you mean by breath work? Because even I've only discovered that in the last year. And so if someone would have said breath work, I would have been like, oh, okay, deep breathing, square box. But breath work is so much more expansive. And you don't have to do a huge definition, but
no, no, no,
for our
but
listeners, like what
it
that means.
is. It is. I was invited to a breathwork session and I had no idea what that was either, right? Except that I had tried a lot of different types of meditation, but my type A personality of go, go, go used that time to start making lists of other things that needed to get done, right? Like, oh, wait, I forgot you because finally you're in silence.
Mhm.
This breath work is, I call it active breathwork meditation. And I also call it lazy man's yoga because we're laying down in Shavasana and we're just there experiencing it. And so it's active breath work, which includes breathing deep into the belly, breathing into the heart, and then exhaling. So it's a rhythmic breath. And that rhythmic breath goes on and on for 20 minutes. And it's pretty wild because those 20 minutes feel like 3 minutes. You don't even know that that time has gone by. But you're actively breathing, which then allows your body, your brain to let go because you're doing something that is completely foreign to the brain. And so it finally just lets go. And you're able to just process whatever you are feeling. And because we breathe so shallow, and especially when we're in trauma, we're not breathing the way we should be breathing. Our posture is bad, everything. So when you start breathing deeply like this, your cells start to get oxygen. Your whole interior body like starts to activate. And so some of us start to get tingles around our whole entire body, but it just shakes up all that stress. It's like shaking off physically, somatically shaking off that stress. And then you go into a 15-minute shavasana and you can just experience whatever it is that you're going to experience. It's very musically guided so that it can be a very blissful moment, which for so many of us, we haven't had that. And
Well,
so,
can I just pause right there? Like that in the middle of trauma, your nervous system is totally dysregulated. And then you just use the word a blissful moment. I know for a lot of our listeners that can sound really foreign and a big question of like, is that possible? And where you specialize in stabilizing, healing the nervous system, it is possible. And doing it through the nervous system versus I see so many partners kind of like looking around going, okay, what externally can I change so I can be okay? Okay, I need my partner to change. Okay, I need this in my life to change. All of these external factors and what you're talking about right now of this internal bliss that can happen as you're going internal and healing your own nervous system. There's just such a power in that.
and I would remove the word healing the nervous system from that because what breath work does is that it resets your nervous system.
Mhm,
Right?
mhm.
It resets the nervous system. It really takes a qualified breathwork facilitator to walk you through this. And I really like, there's like a big asterisk around check the facilitator because re traumatization can happen at any given point, and it depends on the experience of the facilitator. In the US, we don't regulate this kind of work. In the UK and in Europe, they do. And
Interesting.
because I follow with so many of the people in the UK, they do more extensive research on the nervous system than we do here. You have no idea how many other people I try to collaborate with, and they don't even realize that sound healing and sound baths have anything to do with the nervous system. Not only do they not practice well for the people they're serving, they don't practice well with themselves. Like they're doing one good example are the gongs, right? When you hit a gong, it's just so loud. Not only could it be so loud for the people that are here enjoying it, but think about like what it does to your ears. It's like right there receiving these loud noises and crashes in your ears. You're actually hurting yourself too, but it's not taught. And so I always say, check who your facilitator is, check what their background is, ask questions and question why they're not explaining things to you or why you are not getting up and advocating for yourself and saying, yeah, I don't think this is for me. So
Mhm,
that's important to say.
mhm.
But yeah, so breath work is a really great nervous system. There's a great way to reset your nervous system, especially when you cannot control all of the things outside of you. The only thing you can control is your breath and your connection to yourself.
That's beautiful. So, in your journey of resetting your nervous system, it's funny, my brain wants to say heal, but I love that you reframe that. You went to the breath work and then where did you expand from there?
I started to go into the nervous system because one of the things that the facilitator touched on was don't touch people, like, don't physically touch people because they're gonna experience some sort of trauma that comes out of that, and so that made me really curious, right? And so I went down that rabbit hole and I started to learn more about the nervous system, and so it helped me recognize and realize that, wow, there's a need for consent, and there's also a need to explore what exactly is happening to the person, to get to know what the person is going through to facilitate something beautiful for them, to have completion. And that's where, like, my journey started around testing the systems,
Mm.
because the teacher that I learned from was like, "Okay, you have an hour," and at the hour, it was like, "All right, time's up, get out," and it just never settled in my nervous system. It was just like, I don't feel complete. And so, yeah, I just started to test things, and I run my circles and my one-on-ones very much like a workshop where we talk, we share, we spend time, quality time together so that when you have this experience, you're not just leaving with the experience, that you actually walk out very much like Peter Levine's work with a very somatic experiencing where you can come to therapy and have your moment. You can leave feeling empowered versus feeling like you've just climbed a mountain. And experiencing that was like my favorite thing is I want people to come in, leave their sorrows here with me and leave empowered so that they can go off and do the things that they feel they need to do because it gives them the courage to step in and do some hard things.
Well, you and I were talking about before we hit record, we were talking about just where we see individuals in betrayal trauma specifically get stuck. And I see it where they're going along, and said this almost exact same thing, that they get in the groups and they start getting the validation, or they're going to therapy. And the therapist is like, yes, this is why you feel the way you feel. And it goes, ah, that feels so good. Like finally somebody gets me. And then I see partners get stuck here because it feels so good to be validated. And I see them almost create, I call it an island. Like, if for those of you who listened a long time, you've heard me give this island analogy that you go create this little island and you build this beautiful castle. You feel really safe and secure in your castle. But then if we stay there, you start realizing that, like, I'm all alone. I've created such a castle around me that nobody gets to come in or out, and it can actually become a really lonely place. But I see a lot of partners stop here because it feels safe, and I'm using air quotations for those who are listening to this. It feels really safe, and then they don't actually progress forward, and they get stuck here for years.
Mhm. I love that. That's a beautiful analogy. Yes. And so my pet peeve in general is when we get stuck in these places where there is no framework to get us in and get us out. And many times we outgrow our therapists or the people that we're working with, but we're so afraid of the unknown that we don't go searching for something that's going to really pull us into the other side. We get stuck in this place of validation, and that power struggle becomes something that we end up owning because now it feels good. Now we're like, "Oh, now." I feel like the entitlement changes from the betrayer to the victim, right? And it's very seductive to be in power, and it's very seductive to be in a place where I can be very, very vengeful and spiteful, and it's not healing. On the contrary, there is a new term that's out there, which is called post-betrayal syndrome, where what we're recognizing is now you have metabolic issues. Now you're dealing with cardiovascular. Now you're dealing with digestive issues. Now you're dealing, and all of those can be traced back to that betrayal that was not healed. And so hanging out in these groups are great when you need it, but it's also very important to advocate for yourself and think, wow, I'm really not getting anything from this. I'm not learning anything new. We're just rehashing. And what we're doing is we're going, okay, who has a fire? Okay, let's address your fire. And everyone's like, whoa, and holding space for them. And it's like a cheerleading squad at that point. You could have done this. Oh, you said that. Oh, wow, that's great. And I feel like in my experience, it was continuously triggering me. Something would happen, someone would say it, and it was like, yes. And then my warrior suit goes on, and I go off to fight a battle that wasn't even there. So now I'm pretending in my mind that there's a fire where there is no fire. All it is just a trigger. So basically, every week, something new, some new trigger, something new to dive into. And that did just seems so like such a waste of my time. And when I look at the amount of money that I spent, it just didn't make any sense to me. At that point, I was like, there is no return on my investment here.
I really want our listeners to hear this piece because groups aren't meant to be a forever. And if I get someone and they go, yeah, I've been in groups for 4 years, that to me is a, okay, let's pause and look at the deeper reasons on what's happening here. And even like with the group programs we run, I've just been talking with one of our facilitators recently and looking at breaking it up into more phases of helping people move forward. And like the safety and stabilization you need in the beginning is invaluable. It's wonderful. Not discounting that at all. And I think that that can be such a healing space, but it's not a forever space. It should not be a forever space. And so when we move people to the next group, it's really more about stepping into empowerment. It's stepping into the somatic healing. It's stepping into that. And I love what you are doing because to me, you're talking about this nervous system regulation, but it's even bigger than that. Like it includes that, but I see this deeper, and I'm trying to find the right words, but a deeper connection to self. And that to me, as I watch women heal, those who really move forward and have that post traumatic growth in the way that they shed the trauma and they step forward, it really does encompass, like, it needs that nervous system regulation. We cannot do it with our nervous system dysregulated or offline. It needs that. But then there's this deeper, really tapping into the heart, the soul, the spirit. And this is where you and I, whenever we talked a couple of weeks ago, was such a beautiful conversation around this holistic part of looking at healing and looking at you so much bigger than just me. I've experienced this trauma and looking at I'm trying to think of the right word, holistic is the only one coming to mind. Just a holistic journey and you as a holistic individual that we cannot heal just one little part.
Right. And so, what it is, the way I look at it is my work is very foundational. So, if you can imagine your little house was built as a child, and maybe that foundation was not as strong as it should have been, right? Parents who or caregivers who betrayed us or didn't know what to do because they themselves were already very broken. And I don't hold any judgment around that. I look at it with more compassion around how life can be cruel and then it gets passed on, right? Because they didn't have the courage or the bandwidth to change that. So then you have your house and it's been built and it's a little shaky because the foundation wasn't set. And so when something as big as a traumatic experience from a betrayal happens, of course, it's like an earthquake. Your house is going to be torn to pieces, or a tornado that comes and just your house is gone. And so basically, it's rebuilding that structure again, but rebuilding it so well that even if there is another earthquake or another tornado, it's not going to take that long to bring that structure back up. It's not going to take years to build right back up because the foundation is there for you to be able to see, to have the tools to know, and to reinforce those spaces that weren't reinforced as you're going through your life. You continue, it's a journey. It's a journey of reinforcing and redoing structures and continuing to create boundaries for yourself, learning to say no, learning what it feels like. And if it doesn't feel good for you, to be able to step in and advocate for yourself, to understand what gaslighting is, and to be able to notice things, call them out, and be stronger for it. And so when I look at the body, the mind, and the soul, I look at all of these different places that need to be reinforced in order for you to be stronger. And yes, it's a heart-centered way of doing it because no one taught us how to connect to our hearts. Just like everyone growing up was like, "Oh, just pray." And it's like, "Okay, well, what does that look like?" We don't have the mentorship. We don't have the modeling for this. We just don't. And I just thought, well, if it doesn't exist, then I'm going to create it. I'm going to make it. I'm going to do what it takes, but it starts with me. And I have to do it for myself. And once I can do it for myself, then I know I can replicate this. But it took me a lot to figure it out. And I knew that it wasn't going to happen in these groups. And I knew it wasn't going to happen in a lot of this. And that's what took me deeper into my breath work, deeper into heart centered techniques. And the scientist in me was very, very eager to learn more about the nervous system. And I put myself through a 6-month trauma intensive to break everything down. And I realized I'd been living my own life with my trauma goggles on,
Mm.
making choices and decisions based out of fear instead of listening to my heart. And my heart was crying for relief, crying to do something different. But my brain kept me stuck in a loop. And so that was pretty much the beginning of breaking these patterns of loops and loops and loops that were keeping me safe and venturing outside of that safety zone, my comfort zone, and realizing, wow, there's so much more to discover outside of that. And I think that we join some of these groups and they can get so anti betrayer, right? They just focus on the ugly and we don't focus on the root cause of their own trauma that caused them to behave this way. So coming outside of all of that, I learned to have much more compassion. I was still very angry around the Peter Pan syndrome, right? Like they never want to grow up. But I don't know, there's so many ways that we as mothers also add to that by our own trauma, by becoming so hyper independent and not allowing others to come and help. But it just becomes so complex. So breaking it, I call it peeling the layer of a lot of onions because it's very, very confusing to understand why we are the way we are. But when we start looking at what our caregivers taught us and what beliefs we have, and the permission that we give to ourselves to do things different instead of staying stuck in what mom got stuck in or grandma got stuck in. It's freeing. That's where the freedom comes, where you challenge these beliefs. And I've heard it all where I've had clients who say, I wanted to leave. And my mother said, you can't, you have kids. And she said, well, I didn't listen to her. I left anyway. I was so happy, and so just watching women advocate for themselves, not advocate for what mom wants or what grandma wants or what society is telling you, is really having the courage to break the mold.
Well, and I'm going to even add the courage to, before you can even break the mold, going back to what you said of when we have these heart walls and we don't even know what we want or what it's okay to want or desire. When you start being able to turn internally and to explore that, even that can feel really kind of big and scary and foreign. But when you start breaking down those heart walls, I love that you use the word freeing because it truly is. And for a lot of clients and betrayed partners, there's such a fear around if I have any compassion for their trauma or what led them to acting out, then I'm saying that their acting out is okay. And that is not at all what we're saying. We're not giving them a free pass. We're not taking away accountability. But in that hard stance, in our pain, we hold on to that pain from this protective place so tight that we don't allow ourselves to heal because we are only willing and able to look at the bad that they've caused without seeing the full picture. And so much of your healing journey is being able to see the whole picture, which means that I haven't yet worked with somebody who hasn't had sexual compulsive behaviors without some kind of trauma. I just haven't yet.
Right.
And so, again, for those of you listening, we're not giving a free pass. We're not taking away accountability, but in your own healing, to be able to see all of those pieces and get to that place where you can still have compassion and boundaries at the same time. But this will be a block to your own healing if you can't start seeing the whole picture.
How are we, right? We're just in tunnel vision at this point of survival. We're just trying to figure things out and we don't understand. And I felt that way. I felt like my whole world was crumbling. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I was hyper vigilant, and the resources available are not enough. They're just not enough. And it's actually very shocking to me now that I can see the whole picture. I never thought that I would be able to. I thought that it was going to be limited to this and this only. And the only way that I could survive was to run away. That's all I wanted. I wanted to run away. And it's been a really challenging experience. It has not been easy, but the more work I have done on myself, the more, like you say, I have learned what I want, what I like, what I can say yes or no. And through that journey, that's how I discovered human design. And human design is 5 different systems built into one. When I first learned about my human design in my unique way, I was able to identify the reasons why I was a victim of this to begin with. It had been a story that was untold for years and years and years, watching my own mother in her hypervigilance, watching my grandmother and her hypervigilance, and the stories all around the family that were not spoken out loud, but, you know, the silence in the women and the control and just the macho culture. So it was really, really interesting for me to go backwards, to trace where this came from and to start unlearning and unwinding. And I realized a lot of it is the nervous system. And so when we go backwards and we look into family dynamics and we look at mom who is raging and screaming and can't regulate her nervous system, there's a reason for that. There's a reason there's something happening in her own relationship with dad that is causing all of this dysregulation. At the core of it is her resiliency. And then you go backwards to see what their parents had. And so you see that coming from like generations and generations. That if someone would have regulated their nervous system, it would be visible in their lives. And so here's the way I look at it. And it's kind of interesting. This just came to me a few days ago. I sometimes see these beautiful families. And in my neighborhood, I've seen them grow up. And now the parents are now grandparents and they're all united and they're together. And there's a lot of that happening. And that doesn't happen by accident. Someone in their lineage did some heavy lifting to ensure that their lineage was going to be different.
Mhm.
And when I look at my personal lineage and all the work that I've done in comparison to my siblings, I can see how my lineage is completely different than, let's say, my mother's lineage, because she still refuses to do her work. So I see her health ailments. I see how my siblings struggle. And I have very little things in common with them because I'm the one who just refuses the status quo. I'm the one who questions everything. So I become I guess I became the black sheep, and now I think the more awareness that is around us, the more they're going, "Oh," and the ahas are coming. And so they're starting to handle their life different, but it had to be modeled by someone, and that someone just happened to be me.
Well, and whoever is that person who starts the change, a very normal reaction to the rest of the system is, whoa, whoa, that's not how we do it. Get back in line. And so there is this like disruption that comes from that. And so the person who is like breaking that mold often does feel like the black sheep for a period. And sometimes some families don't recalibrate, but a lot of times I will see that person where it makes me think of the quote that says generational trauma can be passed down, but so can generational healing. And I'll even say passed back.
Yeah.
And so that person who heals naturally, it sends out ripples and that healing, and it's not an instant thing. And so for those who are looking for those instant results, I did this, therefore they should do this. Not how it works, but it just takes one person to start shifting
It
that.
really is. The strongest nervous system in the room is the one who wins, and I don't like losing. That was a very big encouragement for me, and just I've been no contact, with my mother for many years on and off. And I finally, again, I'm going to go back to human design, learning who she is by design. She is so defined. She has so much definition in her chart. And anyone who has a lot of definition in the chart sees it one way. Their job is to evolve and be more open, right? And I have so much openness in my chart, which makes sense, all of that energy that came from her and me trying to process it. I'm also the oldest of the kids. There are a lot of unspoken expectations. And I realized that I was put into a leadership position, and that's not who I am here to be. I'm here to lead from the back, not from the front, because no one's going to follow me. And so my siblings rebelled against my leadership. So learning all of that and gaining different ways of being, I realized that maybe it was me who needed to shift and change so that everyone else around me could take their place. Instead of pointing fingers around what they didn't do, they didn't say this, they didn't help, leaving the victim narrative behind, sitting on the saddle, taking control, and just moving forward. I just really put my head down and started doing my work, the work that felt good for me.
Mm.
If it meant I needed to move away from the family, so be it. You cannot heal where you got hurt, right? You cannot. So I removed myself for many years and just did my work. And as I'm integrating back, the shifts are obvious. Things that used to trigger me, they don't have that energy anymore. And because they don't have that energy anymore, no one has power over me. I have power over me. I have sovereignty over how I get to feel, react, and respond. And
Beautiful.
that to me is priceless.
Mhm. Oh, truly. It truly is. We're getting close on time. And I think what you just shared right there, all of the women who are listening are probably going, I want that. How do I get that? What would you say to, and I'm thinking about a lot of our listeners are either brand new to trauma or within the first year or two of trying to move through this. What would you say to them?
I would say to stay curious,
Mm.
because everyone's healing is unique. There are frameworks out there that are helpful, but they're not unique to her. And she needs to figure out what feels good for her and to let go of things that don't. Because ultimately, what we want is for her to feel safe in her body, safe in her choices, safe in how she is showing up in the world, which could be messy right now. And people around do not understand because they don't even know what betrayal trauma means. And the processing of the shame that doesn't even belong to you, I think that's a burden you don't have to carry.
That's so powerful and safe in your body and safe in your choices.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a brutal, brutal life experience that comes your way, but there's hope. There really is hope. It just takes time, and we live in this quantum field now of awareness and things that really just come to you that are you feel attracted to and you're bringing into your space. And I feel like anyone who actually spends time listening to podcasts like yours can find so much more than what is being offered. It just takes you making that choice.
That word, so much more, and following your heart when your heart says more. I truly, like, in my heart of hearts, know that when you are open and ready for more, things will come. And as you're open and as you're looking for them, you will be led and guided to the right person, the right course, the right whatever that is. So I love you've started with the stay curious and then you brought in that more and just yes, just a resounding yes. For those of you who want to learn more, as always, we put in the show notes where you can find Kari and her work and your website. And so go to the show notes for that because you do groups, you do one on one, you offer support in this healing the nervous system. And for those of you listening, just I want you to stop for a minute and give yourself credit for being here right now because you being here listening and being here with Akari and me and talking about this shows that you want more. Like it shows your heart is open to learning and growing and healing and moving forward. And so, like, give yourself credit for that. Like, stop and give yourself a hug and go, I'm doing this. I am choosing healing. Nobody is making you do this. And recognize that you're taking these powerful steps forward and just keep going. So, as always, thank you, listeners, for hanging out with us. Akari, thank you so much for coming and sharing just of yourself today and your energy, your beautiful soul. Thank you for that. And as always, we'll see all of our listeners next week.